Let's go! The Chargers looked like they were going to get blown out again, but instead they pulled off the biggest win of their season.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into a late night edition of the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. What a win. Thank you to the everydayers, especially late night, for making us your first listen today. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, the biggest win of the season.
A colossal statement win for the Chargers after everything looked like it was going to be a continuation of the Bucs game. They turned it around and they beat a winning team, a team that was coming off of a 4-game winning streak. And Daniel, the magic number is down to 1.
It's down to 1, but more importantly, you have faith that maybe this is a team, when they're on, can actually do something in the playoffs. And I think that's the most exciting part. But today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. David, what can you say? It looked like it was going that same direction, just like the Bucs game, and it ends up like this. Do I do it? Do I do it?
Oh, no.
The Chargers pull off the biggest win of the season, and I get to wear this nice hat that David got me for my birthday and Christmas. And David, coming back from down 11 to answer the call like this team did after having about as rough of start as they could have, what can you say? I mean, easily to me is the best win of the season, and it's just crazy to sit here and think about us talking about this game when we know what the other show could have been like.
And what it felt like it was going to be like. I mean, after that first half of football, it was down 11 points in the third quarter, and then everything snaps and it changes. Score 21 unanswered points to take a lead, and then at the end, put together a 6-play, 90-yard put-away drive to cap it off with a touchdown and absolutely take the Broncos off of life support and secure a massive statement win.
Yeah, they were down 11 multiple times. They were down 21-10. They were down 24-13. And it just didn't matter. That every time you thought that it was kind of getting away from them, they had a big play, and maybe none bigger than one we'll talk about later. Just the weird end of the first half, getting that free kick, 57-yard field goal from Cameron Dicker obviously had a huge part of it. But talk about kind of answering the bell when you had lost back-to-back games. You had lost 3 out of 4 games. And what I talked about earlier in this year is just like, you don't want it coming down to having to win the last 2 weeks against the Raiders and the Patriots to save your season, right? Now you're staying away from that and you're beating the best team that you had left on your schedule. And I think doing it in convincing fashion, right? I mean, the defense couldn't get a stop in the first half and the offense couldn't keep up in the first half. And then you respond to kind of pretty much put together your best full game of the season. And that's why I think it's also a game that restores a little bit of faith in this team. Like, this is a team that we had said, kind of the vibe last week was, yeah, they'll probably make the playoffs and then what, right? Yeah. Like, you have no confidence going in there that you're going to actually be able to do anything, but to answer the questions that they have in this game, right? Like, can you come back from a deficit? Can you play a complete game? Can you go out there and get the game, go ahead touchdown when you need it? And not only that, once you have the lead, can you go put that game away? Like, they answered so many different questions that we had about this team where I wasn't sure what they would have to do for me to get some of that faith back. And I mean, obviously, as you saw in that first half, they're a flawed team that still has plenty of things to work on.
Yeah.
But I don't think it could have gone much differently than this, David, and still have me come away as optimistic and positive as I'm feeling right now.
I mean, hey, they were put in unbelievable peril. They were in a position where they really had to dig themselves out of the grave, right? They already had 1 foot and 1 arm in the grave. After that first half, it was ugly. Like, the Broncos had their way with the Chargers. Like, they did whatever they wanted. They ran the ball extremely well in the first quarter, and they dominated the time of possession. And the Chargers couldn't get anything going. They couldn't get any stops on defense, could not get any momentum. Offensively, they did okay. They were able to score a couple of touchdowns, which was great. But the fact that they were able to come back from being down that far after things look so bleak, that shows their resilience. That shows their ability to get down and just say, screw it. I'm going to go for broke. I'm going to go get back in this game. They score the points. They get the stops in the second half, and they go get the biggest win of the season against a winning opponent, which they had only done one other time this season. Of course, coincidentally, that was also against the Denver Broncos.
But it did feel like this was a different Broncos team, and we talked about it this
Coming
week.
off a 4-game winning streak.
Week feels a lot better than it did the first time around. And I mean, that time, it came down to an onside kick. This time it comes down to an onside kick, but you feel a lot better about how it all went down. And I think in this game, what I talked about in the crossover show, was just like, can Justin Herbert carry this offense against this defense? Because going into it, the Broncos were the number one defense in the NFL. They had the most sacks in the NFL, and they had 8 takeaways over their last 2 games. They were as hot as any defense in the league. And what does Justin Herbert do? Goes out there and shuts every single hater up and does it in the most emphatic way possible. And it didn't look like it was going to be like that, right? He had a very bad interception, a very un-Justin Herbert-like interception. To think about him having back-to-back, in 2 games is hard to believe considering he had only 1 going into last week. What does he do? He throws 2 second-half touchdowns. Not only does he lead the game, the go-ahead drive, which ends up being kind of the game-winning drive in some way, but also leads the game-sealing drive and makes the game-winning play when the Chargers need it the most. And overall, it's 22 out of 30, 284 yards, 9.2 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, a QBR of 87.4, and a passer rating of 110.1. Did it with his arm, did it with his legs. Justin Herbert is elite, and hopefully this game in prime time, doing it the way that he did, reminded those out there who have been doubting him, especially recently.
Yeah, hey, Ryan Fitzpatrick, shut your mouth. Take my quarterback's name out of your mouth from now until the end of eternity, until you're talking about with him with some respect. All right? Yeah. Put some respect on Justin Herbert's name. One of the tools that Justin Herbert used to great effectiveness, and Greg Roman for that matter, is play action. According to Next Gen Stats, Justin Herbert used play action on a career-high 47.2% of his dropbacks against Denver, finishing 12 of 15 for 155 yards in this game. His ability to be able to find guys on the play action, it was massive, and it was a huge reason why Justin Herbert was primetime Herbo tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, like we talked about, it's not just getting this win. Getting the win gives you something, but it's the way you got it done, and it's the way that Justin Herbert got this one done. That throw, the go-ahead fourth quarter touchdown throw that he made to Darius Davis, as he has a defender taking him down, how he gets enough on that ball, I have no idea. It's just one of the more incredible throws that you'll ever see Justin Herbert make. He made in this game, and that was really set the tone for what that fourth quarter was going to be like. Then, obviously, gets the little kind of shovel pass to Hassan Haskins, who does the rest and puts the game away with a touchdown. I'm just so impressed with the dude, especially because we know what he looked like at the end of that last game against the Bucs. He got beat up in that first and second half, but he wasn't the same player at all in the second half. And credit to the offensive line for keeping him healthy enough in this game to be able to look like he did to go make those finishing plays in this game. But to only have 3 days of rest and have to turn around and do it against a better defense who has more sacks and gets more pressure and have to go have that daunting task on 3 days of rest and then to go put out that performance that we saw. Don't be tricked by the numbers either. I mean, ran the ball super well. He lost 17 yards because of the way they ended up trying to, end this game and run the clock out at the end.
Killing the clock,
3 carries for negative 17 yards. If he didn't have those, it's 5 carries for 45 yards. An impact player with his legs. Spread the ball around to 10 different receivers. What else can you say? I mean, he was elite in this game, and it was so nice to see that version of Justin Herbert because we hadn't seen it in a while. We saw him with the game-winning drive against the Bengals. But to see this right now when the Chargers needed it most late in their season, David, I mean, I just don't know what else you can say about the dude.
It's clutch. This is the type of performance that Justin Herbert needed to reestablish his prominence in the NFL. This is the type of performance when in December, when the games matter, when playoff seeding is on the line, this is the performances that set you apart and put you in that upper echelon. And Justin Herbert rightly deserves to be among the best quarterbacks in the league. The Chargers are now 9-6. They sweep the Broncos for the first time since 2010. and they have a 97% chance to make the playoffs, baby. Life is good to be a Chargers fan.
Yeah, and I think that it was the most complete game by this offense. And honestly, we probably have to give some props to Greg Roman, as well as the running backs who came through, as well as Ladd McConkey and so many more. So we're going to talk about that and the up and down game for this Chargers defense on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about PrizePicks, because PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And PrizePicks is also the easiest and most exciting way to play, because unlike on other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Plus, they always have great promotions going on, like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% and add even more value to your lineup. And now you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks is also the best way to get action in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Right now, the Chargers already played. We don't need to look at that. We will look towards the NBA, where they're basically going to give you the best deal of the season. You could go with Nikola Jokic more than half a point on Christmas Day. It's not going to get any easier than that. All you need is to hit one more projection, and you're already in the money right there. All you have to do, download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play that $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. It's also that time of the year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting, high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading up to our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. David, we talked about Justin Herbert, who was super impressive in this game, but you also have to tip your cap to his supporting cast and the guys who stepped up around him. I still think that Justin Herbert definitely put this team on his back. He definitely elevated the guys around him, but I truly think this might have been the Chargers' most complete offensive performance, David. When we were talking about kickoff, playing 4 quarters, scoring in both halves, Justin Herbert was great, but this Chargers offense took it to a different level in this game. Probably should even have more points than they did.
Yeah, they did. I mean, they put together a couple of scoring drives in the first half, which was great. Also, they tied their season high in points with 34. Obviously, they did that against the Cincinnati Bengals as well. 28 carries for 117 yards. Obviously, those numbers would have looked even better. As we talked about,
add 17 to that, sure.
Yeah, with the end of game, kind of the antics there
sequence,
from
sure.
Justin Herbert. Ladd McConkey, another great game, 6 catches for 87 yards, and of course Darius Davis. Shout out to Ace. I know Ace is out there with all his Darius Davis love with that beautiful 19-yard touchdown that he caught with Justin Herbert just making an unbelievable, unreal throw. The offense was balanced. Still had some ugly sequences on first down and leading into those second and shorts, but I do feel like they did a better job of winning on first down, which allowed them to stay on the field and sustain drives and use that play action and hit it down the field, which, like I mentioned earlier, was a huge part of the offensive success.
Yeah, and the thing is, to put up 34 against this defense compared to putting up 34 against the Bengals defense are just two completely different worlds, difference. Right? This was the #1 defense in the NFL, tied with the Chargers in points per game allowed this season. And I thought, obviously really leaning into the play action worked. But outside of the interception, just a pretty complete game. And 380 yards, which could have been more, obviously, close to 400 yards in this game, 117 rushing yards. So you get, over 300 yards from Justin Herbert. You get over 100 rushing yards in this game. And you also scored 13 plus points in each half, right? It wasn't all in one. You didn't get shut out. Thank God for an entire half. It was just really, really awesome to watch. Also, shout out to Josh Palmer making one of the catches of the year.
Oh, my goodness, man. That was
on a really big 2-point conversion. A ball that wasn't intended for who it first hit. Ball's tipped. Josh Palmer, very back of the end zone, tips it up with his hand and one-handed and ends up bringing that in on the end line. It was... his ability to toe tap is probably the best on the Chargers. It's probably not even close.
When he
makes those plays, nobody else. I
No
don't
drag
really think
swag
can.
for sure for Josh.
I mean, it was similar to, the 2-point conversion that Jim Harbaugh kept talking about from the Falcons game as well.
Yeah.
But also, David, probably have to tip your cap a little bit to Greg Roman. We were very, critical of him this week. That's the best game he's called. Like, he had the Chargers in position to put points up. You saw creative ways of him using Ladd McConkey and freeing him up. That's the most, probably 3 or 4 wide open catches that we've seen Ladd McConkey all season long. We got a screen pass that worked okay. We saw some improvements from Greg Roman, especially in the passing game, but also the ability to run the football as well. You got to tip your hat to the guy. Critical of what he's done, critical of the hire in general. But in this game, he came to call a heck of a game, and I like that at the end, he was able to help him put it away.
And he even got a 300-pound defensive lineman fullback to juke defenders in the National Football League out of their shoes.
Don't you give Greg Roman credit for that. I mean, Scott Matlock was out there putting the moves on Broncos defenders. I mean, that was when the game was at its worst, and I was like, hey, this might be a terrible game, but I'm going to remember that Scott Matlock, making people miss in the open field.
That was super funny. But no, in all seriousness, like I mentioned, I was probably a little critical of some of his first down calls and just the ineffectiveness in that situation.
There still were issues, yeah.
But they did a great job of still dialing up plays down the football field, getting some contributions from the running game. It is clear and obvious, Daniel, when the Chargers are able to run the ball and they're able to get any kind of quality production out of the running game, it makes this offense so much more dangerous because you can't key in on the, Justin Herbert to just, go rip it, right? You have to at least respect the rushing ability. That's why the back-breaking run at the end was so critically important and why the running backs had such a big part to play in how the Chargers offense looked in this game.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another group you have to shout out. I mean, that Gus Edwards turning back the clock run on the game-sealing drive, breaks a 43-yarder when over the last couple of games we hadn't seen a single Chargers running back hit more than 10 yards in either of those games. For him to break that run at that moment in the game against what has been a pretty good run defense, and just how he did it as well. It's not just, what shows up in the box score. I mean, how many missed tackles did he force on that? At least three, right?
Yeah.
In the open field, ends up, holding onto the ball just long enough. I was screaming at him before he even got hit. Hold on to that football.
He's down.
But a huge game for him, man. I mean, also has 2 touchdowns, one pretty much all him effort-wise, getting into the end zone, finding a way to keep the guys on his back and take them with him. Overall, 14 carries, 68 yards.
The other one was locked in pretty much untouched, Yeah,
the other one was just a well set up play. You don't say that often about the Chargers running game, but that both of those ones, that touchdown and the 43-yarder, they opened up a lane for Gus Edwards to get there, to get to that full speed. But also, hey, Hassan Haskins made one of the plays of the game, catching a short pass, taking it the distance. Like, if I would have told you,
making people miss too, like looking good in the open field and taking,
which is not really his game. No. I mean, he's been their short yardage guy. So for Justin Herbert, stepping up in the pocket, flipping that ball to him, just getting the ball in the hands of a guy, letting him go out there and make plays was really awesome. I mean, to take that the distance, to put the Chargers up 10 in that moment was gigantic. Kamani Vidal, 5 carries for 24 yards. That's a 4.8 average. You will take that. I mean, it's just a unit.
Will.
Yeah, it was just a unit that hadn't brought enough to the table. And in this game, they answered the bell big time. And I do think we have to give a little shout out to the offensive line, David. Yeah. I mean, Justin Herbert, there was a couple plays, especially that second to last drive where it felt like they blew it. Just a wide open miss protection, a free rusher up the middle for a sack on Justin Herbert. Shout out to the defense who gave him the ball back. But I don't want that to let people lose kind of the perspective of, okay, this was also the team that led the NFL in sacks, number 1 defense in the league. Justin Herbert only got sacked twice, and there were a couple of those plays where he did have enough time in the pocket. And we know if you give Justin Herbert enough time in the pocket, if you don't make penalties, he can beat you with whoever he has out there with straight-up Walmart employees. And the guys weren't that tonight, but he can, and they did give him enough time. And also, opened up those big holes for those couple big running plays as well.
Absolutely. You got to give a shout-out to the offensive line, especially to the all-pro in the making, once again, Rashawn Slater, absolutely locking up Nick Bonito, who came into this game with 11.5 sacks. Duke Manyweather put out a tweet, obviously his offensive line coach, said, you got to pay attention to what Rashawn Slater's doing to Nick Bonito tonight, because he was absolutely locking him up. And this was a guy that was creating havoc, especially on this Broncos 4-game winning streak that they had. So when you have that tackle play, We'll talk about the interior, obviously, at another time. But they played exceptionally well in this game. Just gave Justin Herbert just enough time for him to make the plays that he made tonight.
Absolutely, they did. And I mean, I think Rashawn Slater, I had heard through the grapevine that Nick Bonito might be putting together a defensive player of the year kind of resume. And he said that was fun while it lasted because he absolutely put the clamps on him. And the Chargers did, much better. I mean, we're grading on a low bar, but so much better to give them a chance in this game. 34 points with that Justin Herbert interception in plus territory. That is nothing to sneeze at. And like I said, probably the best Chargers offensive performance we've seen all season. But the defense looked as bad as I've ever seen any Chargers defense look for a 9-drive span.
Man.
It was as bad as it could get.
Awful.
And then right when you couldn't see the light, it broke through, and the Chargers defense flipped the switch and put the clamps on the Broncos offense in the second half. So we're going to talk about the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this defensive performance and so much more, including Cameron Dicker's extra weird kick on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed the basic fundamental truths about our world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, amongst many others. And the great thing is all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just sit back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. David, well, we've gone this long without talking about the defense, and probably have to start with the bad because, man, even some of the tweets I was putting out in the beginning of this game, it was about as scathing as you could possibly have it. Because
your tweets,
defense,
mine,
I didn't. I was just rage tweeting blindly, but it was really, really bad, and I was keeping track of just how bad it was. But thank you guys for making us your first listen, because a lot of you didn't just make us your first listen after a great big time win right now in prime time, but a lot of you have been here for the worst of it too, and we've had it 3 out of the last 4 weeks. It hasn't been the funnest post-game show. It hasn't been super positive. Thank you all for making us your first listen tonight. And if you need a second listen, make sure to check out the new slate at Locked On NFL. 2 shows a day. Tyler the Madman Rowland and my boy Tony Wiggins bringing on the guests who cover their teams every single day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. Dave, let's pull it down here and talk about the bad part first, right? The defense in this game, like you said, it was a continuation of the Buccaneers game. You're like, okay, surely they're going to show up. Surely, especially with Bo Nix having 5 picks in the last 2 games, they're not just going to come out and get shredded by the Broncos offense. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. 21 straight points off the rip, David. Long, time-consuming drives, getting run all over, and it was about as ugly as it could get.
It was awful. I was like, oh no, not again, please. You can't put this out there and expect to win a game against anyone, regardless of who you're playing. But especially not a game against a Broncos team that was hot, that was firing on all cylinders, that was playing great defense and was just moving the ball at will. The first 3 drives was just a hot knife through butter. Just absolutely no resistance whatsoever by the Chargers defense. They could not stop anything. It was a wide open gate for the Broncos to run wild, and they did. 65 yards in the first quarter alone. That was 6.5 yards per carry. Now, here's the good news.
You're talking about rushing yards, right?
Rushing yards allowed. Yeah, 65 rushing yards allowed by the Chargers defense in the first quarter. The Broncos, and that was a huge part of their success. They did whatever they wanted, and it's because the Chargers could not stop them at all. And the most frustrating part is they could not get off the field on 3rd and 8+ to save their life. It was it's just it's almost impossible to win a football game when you can't get off the field on 3rd and 8. It's just soul crushing, back breaking. It's a situation you just cannot have if you want to win. The first half, they could not get off the field on 3rd down at all.
No, they couldn't. The most infuriating one is the 3rd and 11. check down to the running back at the line of scrimmage, and somehow that dude gets a first down. But I think that was the most frustrating part, is like, even when you got them to those third and longs, he wasn't even throwing it past the sticks.
No.
Like, he was throwing it short of the sticks, and you guys just weren't able to get there and make a tackle in time. And it was so infuriating, and I just think that those multiple long third downs just absolutely killed them. But at one point, they hadn't forced a punt in 15 straight drives.
Ugh.
Before the last Broncos possession of that first half, it was the third quarter against the Chiefs, the last time they had forced a punt. They had allowed points
Unreal.
on 9 consecutive drives, and on those 9 drives in a row, 51 points. 51 points scored on 9 consecutive drives. That's how bad it was.
Talk about getting beat up.
What makes the second half that much more impressive, because the Chargers held the Broncos to only 6 points in the second half, and 3 of those were a desperation field goal just to get them to an onside kick I don't really care about. Looked like an entirely different team. Huge adjustments made by Jesse Minter, which was just gigantic. Made the big stops in the second half. They got off the field in those third downs. Shout out Derwin James, right? Big play, open field, goes up and tackles a huge tight end. Plays like that happened the entire game. You got contributions from Kendall Williamson. Dean Leonard breaks up a third down play when you really need it the most.
Yeah.
And Bo Nix averaged 3.3 air yards per attempt in this game.
Yeah.
He only had 1 pass over 20 yards, and that was the big, long, 50-plus yarder to Marvin Mims, where Tariq still does, goes inside instead of keeping contained on the outside, turns into a big play. But that is an answer of all answers. Like, the Chargers desperately needed something. I mean, we went from Jesse Minter getting a head coaching job to trying to replace Jesse Minter like Greg Roman in 2025 is where it felt like it was heading at one point in this game. So to have that response, just gigantic.
Oh, it was massive. Yeah, I mean, and again, like I said, they gave up 65 rushing yards in the first quarter. They did not allow more than 45 rushing yards the rest of the game. So they
were on
really,
pace for 260.
Yeah.
Just for the math heads out.
They
there.
really, stepped it up, and they did a fantastic job of limiting the effectiveness in the running game, which also really allowed the Chargers to stop Bo Nix throwing down the field. And the couple times that he did throw down the field, the Chargers were there to get the ball out and not allow those completions. 6 points allowed total in the second half, with 3 punts included, which was crucial. They finally were able to get off the field. They didn't get any turnovers, but they were able to get off the field, and they were able to get the ball back to Justin Herbert, which in the second half, as we talked about, Justin Herbert was humming. So the Chargers defense, just amazing answer from getting just smacked for the last 2.5 games, and then being able to come back and reset, make real-time in-game adjustments to go out there and win a game that, quite frankly, you had to have. And now puts you in such a great position going into your final 2 games that one of those 2, and that's a wrap. You punch your ticket, and hopefully you're enjoying some rest in the final week of the regular season.
Yeah, I think that, you obviously hope for better for this Chargers defense. This was a Broncos offense that had scored 29 plus in 4 straight games, so it's not like it was a bad offense going into it. It was a team that put up a ton of points. But the Chargers defense did what they needed to. And if you look at it just after they scored that third touchdown to make it 21-10 and they couldn't stop them, to really give them only 3 points for the rest of that game, and to let your offense get back in it, and to let your offense pull away and give them multiple chances to do it at the end of that game. It was brilliant by this defense in the second half. It was huge, but it would have been a whole different game had it not been for a weird play at the end of the first half, because there was a scenario where the Broncos would have been driving there on that last drive for not, a field goal to make it 7 points, but for the game-tying touchdown potentially. And this is what happened. End of the first half, the Chargers decided to take a timeout with only like 8 seconds left, and it ended up paying off in a gigantic way. I think they wanted to probably give Darius Davis a chance. He's one of the best punt returners in the league. That's not how it played out. Darius Davis calls for a fair catch. He gets tripped up by a Broncos defender, and now all of a sudden, you're in Hail Mary range, right? Like, you're on Broncos side of the field on the 47-yard line with a chance to potentially salvage something from this first half, or at least give you a chance to, because at that point, things were getting away from them a big way.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Justin Herbert's out on the field. They call timeout. You see Ryan Ficken, special teams coach extraordinaire, screaming, no, something's going on.
Yeah.
What it is After a fair catch, you're allowed to attempt a fair catch kick, which means you can kick off a free kick with no, offensive line necessary. You can literally just have him from that spot where the ball is, go kick it as far as they can.
Yeah.
It never happens because when are you catching a fair catch and then wanting to kick a field goal right after it?
Right.
If you're only catching a fair catch, on kickoffs and punt returns, when are you going to be in field goal range? Well,
yeah.
The Broncos' mistake turned into a huge pivotal turning point in this game. The Chargers go out there, send Cameron Dicker for a 57-yard field goal, something maybe we should have seen in past weeks, and he goes out there and cool as a cucumber, just absolutely drills it.
Nails it. I mean, Cameron Dicker, man, what an absolute weapon that the Chargers have now with a kicker that's so good, that's so comfortable with those 50-plus yard kicks. We've seen it many times in the past, guys. This is not a gimme. Like, as much as Cameron Dicker is making it look, the Chargers cycled through a lot of different kickers that were 50-50 at best, over 50 yards. Cameron Dicker is pretty much automatic. That's such an unbelievable weapon to have. That play right there was crucial. It gave the Chargers momentum, allowed them to get within one score, and they took that momentum all the way to a big victory over the Broncos.
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, shout out to wherever my wife saw this, but I also heard that Cameron Dicker already tied the most 50-yard attempts or 50-yard makes by any Chargers kicker. And they have had some good kickers in the past, but in 2+ seasons, Cameron Dicker is already in the Chargers record books, is right where he should be because the dude is automatic. Best kicker in Chargers history, potentially. I mean, he's really not that far off, and he's like 3 years into his NFL career already. But, hey, last shout out, Nick Neiman. That's how you make the hands team. No one wants to see it come down to an onside kick. Only 7% have been converted this year. I'll tell you, Will Lutz put one out there that could have gotten recovered by the Broncos. That was a great kick. It took a great Broncos bounce, and you have a guy that's really trying to block somebody in the front row on the hands team, have it, snap up into his face mask, and for him to grab that, hold on to it, go down with it, and essentially end the game right there. And Chargers clock management late in the game, a little better, right? Found a way to not have to punt to Marvin Mims, who's super dangerous, not risk a block punt or anything like that. I thought they handled that part pretty well, but it's going to make a hell of a buy or sell show on Monday, David, but it is the season, right? Maybe it's a naughty or nice show on Monday. To make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, because the Chargers just gave you an early Christmas present, and for me, a belated birthday present since they got blown out on my actual birthday. Make sure you guys are back here on Monday because it is your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there. To make sure you don't miss the show, you can also find it every day on our social media. My Twitter at Dan Talk Sports, David at Dro Talk SD, as well as the show's page at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So excited, so much more confidence in this team going down the stretch, and potentially some better outcomes as far as playoff matchups and playoff seedings, which we'll get all into next week, the week of Christmas. But like I said, we already got our present. But make sure you guys are back here on Monday for Naughty or Nice. Until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.